Cuba is located in the Antilles Ocean at the entrance of the Gulf of Mexico. And then it's a location, given its location, it was called the key of the New World. The New World is the way that they used to call to the Americas after the European came and discovered the lands of America, because the geographical position, Cuba is at the entrance of the rest of the continent. And during all this period of colonization, Cuba was the first point where the flood from Spain stopped, and then they went to the rest of the continent, and the last one when they returned to Spain. That's why Cuba, during the, if you don't understand something or if I am speaking too fast, just please tell me. And then, because of that reason, Cuba developed a very, very international cultural development, because they have the influence of when they conquered Mexico, when they conquered Peru, when they went to America, they departed from Cuba because it was the first place they stopped before going to the rest of the continent. It's pretty mixed in Cuba, because also of that history of colonization and because of our geographical position. You can see every kind of person. People like, look, if you go to Cuba, everybody will call you China or Chino, Chinese. But Chinese is also an environment term. To your boyfriend, your Cuba boyfriend, it doesn't matter if you are blonde from Sweden, they call you China, mi China, it's environment, mi China, mi Chini, and you call to your boyfriend mi Chino. If you met a Cuban and you have a relationship with a Cuban man and you call him, oh, mi Chino, he mouth like this, because it's kind of environment, mi China, mi Chino. Also we say negrita or negrito, like black. There are environment terms. And then we have mostly mixed people, but there are also blacks, whites, and people like Asian shape that we call mostly Chinos. In 1492, have you heard about Christopher Columbus? Christopher Columbus was a sailor who came from Europe to America. That is what they call American discovery. They came in 1492 to Cuba, and that was the first contact of the island of Cuba and mostly the Americas with Europeans. And then the Spaniards, they colonized Cuba, and they developed the sugar cane industry. Cuba was called the sugar part of the world because it was the country that produced more sugar, and they developed the economy on that. But to do so, the Spaniards, they brought from Africa the slaves. My grandparents, they came from Africa as slaves. And then, because it was a really huge industry, in the 18th century, the population of blacks in Cuba was largest than everywhere, than every others, because they were working. There was the workforce for the sugar industry. And then Cuba became a mixed, more than in the States, because in the United States they brought the slave also, but the colonizer from England, they came to America with their families. And the Spaniards, they came alone, men alone. And you know, the male alone, the women that they are there, they were the blacks, and they became more mixed. So Cuba are more, do you understand the word mestizos? Mixed race. It's not like in Japan, 90% of or 90% of population is Japanese, and you can say, oh, these are the Japanese. In Cuba, it's very difficult that because everything, you can find everything in Cuba. Culturally speaking, because of Spain, Cuba is a Catholic country. It's the main tradition of that, but because the presence of African slaves, they also brought to Cuba their own beliefs. And then in Cuba, they were created another religion which is called Santeria or Regla de Ocha. You can check when you have chance in the web, if you write Santeria, you can find some visual information about the rituals, the dance. Santeria has a very important impact in the folklore. Folklore is a word in English. Yeah. Folklore in Cuba are more distinguished by the music. Cuba is a very, very musical. That's why when you came in here, there were Cuban music. Because I cannot even think in Cuba without the music. Because music, dancing, who knows how to dance salsa here? Nobody dance salsa? Salsa odori? No. And then there are many places in Roppongi you can go to learn how to dance salsa. And then that is the most, I think, the more significant international scope of the Cuban tradition, the music, the salsa. Salsa, you have to dance salsa, you are not Cuban. So, dinner without rice is not a dinner. People think, Japanese believe that they eat a lot of rice. No, Cuban eats more rice because you have many different dishes. And when you go to a restaurant, you can have like a sushi with small bowl of rice, or at the end a little bit of rice, but no, you are not eating rice every day or every single meal. But in Cuba there is not a meal without rice. I was talking to him that when I went to China, at least for Cubans, China is the country of the rice. You know, when I came, the lady who spoke to me, she was studying in Cuba. She was graduated in Cuba. And then I asked her, hey, did you like Cuban food? And she said, no, it was a rice. A Chinese telling me that we ate a lot of rice because rice is important. And black beans, white beans, every kind of beans. But especially the black beans with white rice is like the national ideal. Is a black bean with, you can make like a soup to mix it with rice, or you can cook it together, that we call congri. Remember that word, congri. Congri is a way to call the national dish in Cuba. It's a mix, it's cooked mix, the rice with the black bean. But Kiki, that the crisis in Fukushima, I didn't understand what word. I live here in Montesando, close to here. And then I work in my house a lot, writing. And when that was the crisis in Fukushima, I heard this guy in the street yelling, Yakimo! Yeah, they said, oh, what happened? This is Fukushima, it's the radiation. Because I didn't know what it meant. He was selling Yakimo. But this is an example of why you have to try to understand the others.